You might not be able to see Peter's face and reaction for that, but I did, and that was awesome. So welcome in, everyone. If you're not awake already, you sure are now. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you are joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science, and exciting educational opportunities to kids all around the world. So thank you so much as we dive in with another super awesome school year. Welcome back. I know classes are a little bit different this year, but we've got some really great stuff coming for you all month long, and I'm excited to dive in today. So today's presentation is sort of a joint thing. It's exciting. We're going to talk about some really cool research and some science going on. We're joined live by Peter Soroye in Ottawa. He is at the University of Ottawa, where he's a conservation biologist. You know what? I'll bring him into the broadcast. We can chat with him on screen. So Peter is joining us. He's going to talk about pollinators, his love for bees and all sorts of cool insects, how climate change and habitat loss are affecting these really integral animals in our ecosystem. So I'm excited about that. But we're also going to dive in with BackyardBio. So Peter is an avid amateur nature photographer. If you check out his website and social media, he's got the coolest pictures of the coolest species all around the globe. So he's going to highlight his own love of nature, how you can get involved wherever you might be joining from to get out, explore your backyard, literally or figuratively, and share that wildlife with us. So we're going to be talking about BackyardBio today too. I think most of our classes that are joining live have registered already, which is awesome. So we've got classes joining us in Virginia, Minnesota, Alberta, Ontario, and a student all the way in India. Welcome in, guys. We'll introduce you more when we do Q&A. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Peter. Thanks so much for joining us today, Peter. Let's take it away, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I am so hyped to just be able to geek out about some science and nature and some really cool animals with you guys. So I'll head to my PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. So yeah, I'm Peter Soroye. Thank you for the intro. That was I am so pumped up right now after that. That was thank you, Jesse. And I'm super excited to chat a little bit about some of the research I do and some of the things that I'm looking at, some of the things that you can do to help save the world, and how cool BackyardBio is, and why you should hopefully join in if you haven't already. So I'm Peter. A little bit about me. I live in Ottawa, and I was born in Toronto and grew up in Northern Ontario, but I've been in Ottawa for the last couple of years. If you don't know where it is, this is it on the map. It's kind of in pretty close to Toronto, pretty close to the border of US and Canada. Really great city. Some really beautiful nature around it. I really like the city there. And I'm a PhD student, so I go to the University of Ottawa, and I'm a PhD student, so I've been in school for a long time. If you want to do a PhD, you have to finish high school, you have to do 4 years of an undergrad degree, and then you usually do a year or two of a master's, and then you start your PhD. So it's a long time. But when you get to this stage, it really doesn't feel like school. There are no tests anymore. There's no exams, or you don't have to memorize things for courses. So it's a lot more fun. Instead, you just you think of a question that you want to answer, something you're really curious and really passionate about, and then you get to spend all your time just trying to answer that question. So for me, I'll talk about what I do a little later on, but for me, the question, what I'm really excited about is nature and conserving the beautiful wildlife and landscapes that we have on planet Earth. And so the question I get to just answer all day is, how can we save these things and keep them around a bit longer? But I'm really just a regular dude outside of that. So I enjoy canoeing. I enjoy being outside. I love Star Wars and other movies. I'm a huge fan of the Raptors. I'm a little heartbroken that we got kicked out of the playoffs this weekend, but next year. And I love music. I love rap and hip hop and R&B. I'm just a regular dude. I like regular things. And I just happen to really love nature and conservation. And so that question that I study for my PhD, the research that I do focuses on saving that nature. And specifically, I look at pollinators, things like bumblebees and butterflies. And so bumblebees are, of course, the cutest insects of all time. Butterflies are a very close second and the cutest insects of all time. And they're really just beautiful animals. I'm sure you've seen bumblebees, probably. Hopefully, you've seen them. They're pretty common across North America and Europe. They're really noticeable because they're so big, they're so thick, they're so fuzzy. They're just kind of buzzing around on these flowers. You often see them like almost flop into like a flower, and they'll kind of walk around it, sip up some nectar. They'll get all this pollen attached to their body. It's really funny to watch. But they're really great, not just because they provide all of this like beauty into the world, but they're also really important pollinators. And so pollination is a really important process for a lot of flowering plants. Up to 75 to 95% of flowering plants across the world need to have animals to help them pollinate. So when the flower opens up and it has, this little grains of pollen on it, it needs somebody or something to help move that pollen from one flower to another flower. And so usually, and to do that, and if it doesn't have that happen, it can't make seeds, it can't make fruit, and it can't make new plants. So it needs that to reproduce. And so bees and butterflies and other things like moths and flies and bats are really great at moving those grains of pollen from one flower to another flower. And so we call them pollinators because they're really good at doing that. And bees and butterflies, because they're pollinators, are really important for holding together a lot of the wild landscapes that we look at when we go outside or when we go into the outdoors. So if you think of a forest or you think of a meadow or you think of a plain or savanna, all of these landscapes have flowers. They all have plants that need to reproduce, that need to make more plants. And so without pollinators, without animal pollinators, a lot of those landscapes start to fall apart. And they're also really important for us as human beings as well. Pollinators are really great because they pollinate about 1 out of every 3 bites of food that you take. And it's not just, and it's not just every food. It's overwhelmingly, it's the really tasty, really colorful fruits and vegetables that we love. So without bumblebees and butterflies and other pollinators, we don't have nuts, we don't have berries, we don't have things like squash or tomatoes. So you can picture, it's starting to become fall. It's starting to get cooler. If we didn't have bumblebees and butterflies to pollinate, then we wouldn't be able to carve pumpkins at Halloween. We wouldn't be able to cook squash at Thanksgiving, and we wouldn't be able to have, we'd be able to have spaghetti, but we wouldn't be able to have any spaghetti sauce. There'd be no tomatoes without bumblebees. And so these pollinators are really important for natural landscapes, but also for us as human beings, for the food that we eat. And so they're really important for those reasons too. And unfortunately, they're disappearing. Like a lot of other animals across the world, bumblebees and other pollinators over the last few decades have become rarer and rarer. They're kind of disappearing from a lot of spots where they used to live. And bumblebees that used to be really, really common, sometimes we can't find them at all anymore. And this is from a lot of different things, but overwhelmingly, it's because of things that we humans are doing. So it's because of a mix of different things, but things like climate change, when we pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and it causes climate change. It makes things like droughts and heat waves and fires, wildfires, more likely and more intense. Other things that humans do, like habitat loss, we'll cut down forests and we dig up meadows to make farms or to make houses. This destroys habitats for bees as well, and things like our use of pesticides and the way we spread diseases around and parasites to other wild populations. All of these things, a lot of the things that we humans do that we need to do, we need houses, we need food to eat. But a lot of the ways that we're doing this right now means that we're destroying a lot of habitat for bees and making them disappear from the world around us. And so a lot of the research that I do, and a lot of other conservation researchers do, is looking at ways that we can still do these things that we need to do, but do them in a way where we're not causing bees to disappear. So we look at what exactly is it about deforestation, or what exactly is it about climate change that makes bees and other pollinators disappear, and how can we stop doing those things and help those bees that are disappearing start to recover. And so that's the research that I do, and it's not just applicable to bees, because around the whole world there are a lot of animals that are under threat from climate change or habitat loss or other things that humans are doing. So animals like tigers or like elephants or like or like leopards or pandas. All of these animals are under threat, and they need our help. They need conservation scientists, and they need researchers and scientists to help them out and figure out how they can survive better and how we can conserve them. And that's why, and there are a lot of scientists working on this right now, but there aren't enough. We need more scientists, because to answer these questions, to figure out why these animals are declining and how we can stop it, we need to know where these animals are. And we don't need to just know where the big animals are. We don't just need to know about tigers and leopards and pandas. We also need to know about where the little things are. Where are like the little birds? Where are the chickadees? Where are the warblers? Where are the different spiders and different types of flies and bees? We need to know where everything is, so we can get a big picture of how everything is doing as a whole, and how we can help not just one animal or two animals, but entire species and communities of animals. And to do this, to be able to protect communities of animals, we need a whole community of scientists, and we need a lot more scientists. And so to figure out how to save the world, we need to know, we need more scientists telling us where things are. And that's where I kind of switch from talking about me and my research to talking about you and things that you can do, and how dope a program BackyardBio is for helping us save the world. So one of the ways that we can collect more observations of animals and figure out how to conserve them better is through community science programs and things like iNaturalist or Seek or eBird or eButterfly or Bumblebee Watch. There's a whole bunch of these programs that we can use to go out, look for animals, figure out where they are, snap a picture of them, and then upload them on these apps or these websites. And when you do this either on your own or when you do it as part of BackyardBio and that project, then they get added to this huge website, to this huge library of information that other scientists can go in and I can use to figure out where bees are, where butterflies are, and what's happening to them. Other people can use to figure out where birds are or what's happening to squirrels. All of it gets added to this huge library of information that we use to help save the world. And so using these programs and participating in BackyardBio, exploring your habitat and the places around you, it's not just about saving the world, it's also about having a lot of fun. I don't know about you guys, but I love exploring the outdoors. I love exploring the places near to me. For me, it started when I was really little. I spent a lot of time outside, looking at weird things, at plants, at trying to find salamanders or other bugs. When I was inside, I was always looking through National Geographic magazines or watching documentaries on the TV. And I used to think that wildlife was always something that was in like these exotic, faraway places. I used to think it was always in these like, it had to be you had to go to South Africa to see wildlife, or you had to go to Madagascar or to Australia or something. But and I've been lucky enough to actually get to go to some of these exotic places. Last year, I got to go to Kruger National Park in South Africa, and that was just incredibly cool to see things like elephants and kudu and rhinos and leopards and cheetah and zebra and lions and giraffes. And even one time I saw lions eating a giraffe, which was like sad, but circle of life. It was really cool to see. I used to think that this was what like wildlife watching was, and this was what like going on a safari. You had to go somewhere exotic. But even when I was on that safari, some of the coolest things weren't the big things. It was the small things too. So it was really cool to look out on a plane and see like, a whole herd of elephants and stuff there. But it was equally cool to look up and see like amazingly colorful birds, like this lilac-breasted roller on the top left. That was the most colorful bird I've ever seen in my life. And it was just like so easy to overlook, but when you like looked for it, it was so cool to see. And there were a lot of like really neat birds. There were a lot of really neat things like these small animals like mongooses. Some of these mongooses, they live in these like termite mounds and they burrow out the termite mounds. And then when it gets to like sunset, the whole family like piles out on the outside of this termite mound, and there's just like a whole pack of these like little mongoose like with their long tails just like sprawled out on the termite mound. It's really funny. And then of course you have these like big butt baboons that are just running around and they have their butts everywhere. It's really funny. And it was like still on the safari, but it was like the little things about it. And more for me, I've started to realize that you can go on really cool safaris in your own backyard, looking at the smaller things. You don't have to go to crazy places. And I really mean you can do it in your own backyard. So this is where I live. This is Ottawa, Canada. It's a town of like 1 million people, so it's pretty big. It's one of the bigger cities in Canada. There's a lot of buildings, a lot of like stores and everything, a lot of like development there, but it's still a pretty green city. But I happen to live right downtown. So this is where I live about at that star. And I live in an apartment, so I don't actually have a backyard, but the backyard that I go to is about 10 minutes away on foot. And it's like by a river, there's like a little bike trail. It's really like developed, it's basically like a soccer field, and then there's like a bike trail and some like bushes next to it. But I often go there just to like relax and look at some nature. Sometimes I'll bring my camera, and I'm always like mind blown by the crazy things that I can see. So this is from actually yesterday. I went out and I went out after dinner and it was pretty cold. It was pretty windy and it was pretty dark. And I honestly didn't think I would see anything. But the thing about looking for nature near you that's really cool is that a lot of these things are so hard to see unless you start to really, really look for it. So here, for example, I like saw this bush and I was like, oh, I don't think there's anything here. But I just waited like 1 or 2 minutes. And the more I waited, the more different things started to pop out to me. And then I was just like mind blown. And so I'll show you. So here I thought, there's probably nothing. And then I saw like this flicker of movement and I looked like a little closer. And I don't know if you can see it here, but on this flower in the middle, there was a crab spider. And it was so amazing to see. I watched it for a few minutes and it just kind of like crawled around this flower. It would like perch at the edge. And it looked like it was just like waiting for some flying insect to swoop by and it would like snatch it out of the air. Sometimes it would crawl to the bottom of the flower and it would just kind of like wait there. It was really cool to watch. And I thought that was like cool enough. And then I was about to leave, but I saw in this other flower the flower's kind of curled up. I saw this like flash of movement inside of it. And so I looked a little closer and there was a whole bee inside of this flower, just like curled up, like I guess waiting to kind of sleep for the night. And so I watched this bee for like another few minutes and it was so cool to watch it just like it kept like shifting position and it would just like go in these like little circles in the flower. Maybe it was like sipping up nectar or maybe it was actually just trying to find a comfortable spot. But it was so cool to watch. And I continued along last night after seeing these things. And I saw in like 3 or 4 flowers, some more of these like bees, these metallic green sweat bees perched inside, and a couple other spiders and some other cool insects. But it was really, really cool. And it was literally just like 10 minutes away from my house. I was out there for like an hour and I saw like some really cool things. And you can do that, especially in kind of where I am in Eastern North America, Northeastern North America, there are a lot of really cool things you can see even in the middle of the city if you're going out to look. So you might see, an eastern-tailed blue, one of these little butterflies. They're bright blue, and so they kind of flash when they flap around really close to the ground. And they have little tails at the end if you look really closely. Or you might see one of these metallic green sweat bees, the same one that was curled inside the flower. And these bees are so neat. They're like, if you look at them and the sun hits them, it looks like someone carved out a piece of jade or some like gemstone and then gave it wings and it started flying away. Or you might see one of these like electric blue and green damselflies that are like actually pretty common, but like so vibrant when you like watch them. The other day I was walking through and I just like went down to the side of the river in like this little forested area. And there were like 3 or 4 birds just taking a bath in the side of the river. It was really cool. And this is the type of thing that like, you don't have to go super far away. You don't have to go to another country. It's literally right like in your backyard or in your neighborhood that you can see these really cool behaviors and really cool animals doing these type of things. And I'm always surprised by the type of things you can find in dead leaves sometimes. A lot of bugs seem to like playing hide and go seek, and they're just like really well camouflaged with these dead leaves and stuff. And it's really cool what you can find. And sometimes you can see bigger things too. There's always birds, really bright yellow birds, like a yellow warbler sometimes, chickadees that are always like really curious and hopping around in the forest. You might catch a turtle out on a log catching some sun, or if you hear some rustling when you're in a forest, look up and like look closely because it might be a baby raccoon like taking a nap in the afternoon. And of course, so there's wildlife everywhere, literally in your backyard, whether you're in Ottawa or if you're in downtown Toronto. You can see some really beautiful wildlife if you just take a minute, take some time to look, um, and look for it. It can be really, really cool. And it's awesome to be able to take a phone out with you and try to snap some pictures and put them on iNaturalist, because people will tell you what it is. If you don't know, you can learn more. It's a really cool way to be. And so yeah, BackyardBio is awesome. Not only will you have a lot of fun with it, but you'll also make a lot of really happy animals, because you'll be adding in all of this information that you add in, help save the world a little bit. So on that, thank you so much. Happy to answer any questions about BackyardBio, about animals, about bees, about butterflies, about pollinators, or university or anything.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, man. Geez, that was awesome. You're hired, Peter. We have over 11 classes watching us live from across Ontario, Iowa, North Carolina. Just the most classes we've had for any live session in the entire school year so far. So thank you so much for diving in with your passion. Mr. Kim in Owen Sound wanted to mention that he just loves your enthusiasm, genuine interest. So this is a really inspiring presentation for a lot of kids, and we really appreciate you joining us. So let's dive in with questions. For anyone on YouTube or Facebook, a lot of you have already let me know where you're joining from. That's awesome. Type in your questions. We'll take as many as we can. But first, what we're going to do is I'm going to go to Miss Holden's class, joining us in Spruce Grove in Alberta. So Miss Holden, you're in the broadcast with us now. If you want to share your student's question, go for it.
Hi there. We're watching through Google Meet, and Hunter is wondering, do big bees collect more pollen than little bees?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question, Hunter. And yeah, you're right. Big bees do tend to collect more pollen than little bees. And big bees can also do other really cool things, and particular pollinate in really special ways. So bumblebees are a great example of this. They're really big bees. If you compare them to other bees, sometimes they're like double or triple or quadruple the size of other smaller bees. And because bumblebees are so big, and because when they buzz so loud and at like a really, really high frequency, or at a particular frequency, when they land on flowers, when these bumblebees land on the flowers, they actually shake the pollen off of the flower. And so some plants like tomatoes and squash, small bees just can't pollinate them because the small bees can't knock the pollen off of the flower. So big bees have to pollinate sunflowers, and they can also carry a lot more on their bodies as they're flying from flower to flower.
Fantastic. Great first question, guys. Let's bring in Miss Burge's class, joining us in the nicest named town we've probably had all year, Eden Prairie, Minnesota. So Miss Burge, come on in and demute your mic for us, and we'll take your question. There you go.
Hi. We are so excited. We want to thank you for your information. But one of my kiddos, Smree, would like to know why most food comes from bees. We thought only honey came from bees.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question, Smree. And yeah, so there are two big groups of bees. There are like honeybees, which is where honey comes from. And honeybees live in those, usually kind of white hives that you sometimes see like on farms or at the side of the road. And honeybees are actually more like farm animals than wild bees. Honeybees initially are from Europe, and we used to grow, keep the hives and take honey from them. And now we move them here. And so they're really useful. Honeybees are really great at making honey, which is delicious. Everyone loves it. They're also really great for pollinating like fields of crops, of certain crops. But honeybees are basically farm animals, right? We keep them in these huts. They don't do super well outside of them. Outside of honeybees, there are all these wild bees that just live in the landscape. And so these are things like bumblebees, those really big ones. It's things like those metallic green sweat bees, the ones that I had pictures of, and other types of little bees. All of these wild bees, all of these kind of like native, they're from North America. These are the ones that will pollinate like the wild landscapes. And these are the ones that pollinate things like tomatoes and squash and a lot of these like fruits and vegetables as well. So they're different from honeybees. Honeybees do a lot, but these wild bees do a lot more.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Miss Plant's class joining us in Mississauga, grade 6s. They want to know on Facebook, what sparked your interest in pollinators? Was there a particular experience you had or anything that drove you to this current career path?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I think my like the thing that really sparked it was when I was in university. I got a job in the summer helping out in a lab, and I was working as a research assistant. And the job was I got to go around and catch butterflies for the summer. We were doing this monitoring of different field sites and locations around Ottawa. And so we just got to go out every day. We were swinging the nets. It was like SpongeBob looking for jellyfish. We were just catching butterflies and trying to monitor how abundant they were in regions and what species were in these different regions. But it was a lot of fun. And not only was it a lot of fun, but it was like, once you start really, really looking for butterflies and you have like, you know, as a mission to like look for butterflies, you start to see them everywhere. They're the type of thing like bees and like other insects that fades into the background. But once you like start looking for them, you notice them on your way to work, you notice them when you're in the park, you see them everywhere. And then from that moment on, I was like hooked. And like whenever I go somewhere, I always have like, if not like a pair of binoculars, then a camera with a long lens. And I'm always looking for like some really beautiful butterflies or to catch some of this like really cool insects and stuff.
Awesome. You mentioned phones earlier too. Actually, before we dive in with more stuff, I want to mention, Peter, if you want to come out of screen share so you can see us and check us out, you go right ahead, man. But yeah, whether a nice camera, if you have something like Peter or I have when we take photos of nature, just a camera phone, or even a sketch pad. I mean, some of the first experiences I have were in my backyard, literally drawing the animals, really bad drawings. I am a terrible artist. But it just helps highlight what you've seen, gives you a sense of observing more closely, and all those things make a huge difference when you're going out and exploring nature near you. So awesome. All right, so many questions for you. This is awesome. I'm going to go to Miss Gully's class in Ewing, Virginia. If you guys have a question for us, come on in and go for it. Just demute your mic and you should be good to go. Perfect.
Introduce yourself. This is Jacob Mooney, and he has a question for you.
Nice.
Okay, I was wondering, why do animals that pollinate or pollinators need to pollinate for our Earth?
Yeah. Why do they need to pollinate? Perfect.
Yeah, great question. And the biggest reason that they need to pollinate is because those plants, the flowering plants, a lot of them need to have the pollen transferred from one flower to another. So these flowers, in each flower, they have, you know, a little bit of pollen, and then they need to transfer that pollen from one plant to another. So because, you know, animals can do this because they can just walk up to each other and they can transfer things like that. But because plants just sit in one spot, they don't have legs, they need different ways to be able to transfer that pollen. And so some plants just throw all of that pollen into the air. You know, if you think of, you know, things like grasses and rice or things like that, they'll just take their pollen and just throw it all up into the air, and they'll just hope that the wind will like bring it to another plant and it'll happen to be the same species. But other plants, instead of relying on the wind, they rely on other animals. And so that's where these pollinators come in. The plants produce generally kind of like nectar, which is like really sweet, sugary like substances. And these pollinators, they don't want to transfer the pollen, but they want to like drink this nectar. And so they go get some nectar from one flower, and when they go to another flower to get more nectar, they just end up transferring that pollen from one flower to the other. And that's what the plants need to be able to make seeds and make fruit and to reproduce and make new plants.
Yeah, great questions, guys. We're going to go to Akash all the way in Visakhapatnam in India in a minute. So I'll come to you in just 2 seconds, man. And thanks for the enthusiasm joining in on every session for the last month and a half, I swear. But I'm going to take a quick one from YouTube. So Miss Akash joining us, and she wants to know, or her class wants to know, do different kinds of bees collect pollen from different kinds of flowers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And they do. There are some bees that are really, really specialized on different types of flowers. And some butterflies as well that are really specialized to different kinds of flowers. In bumblebees, it's really cool. There are like two, you can kind of split all bumblebees into one of two groups, either bumblebees with short tongues or bumblebees with long tongues. And a lot of the time that determines what flowers they can pollinate from, because they'll try to get the nectar from flowers that have kind of longer stems. If they have long tongues, they know there'll be a lot of nectar in the plant because it's only the long-tongued bumblebees that can go drink it. So the short-tongued bumblebees tend to be you know, kind of limited to those plants with shorter stems, and the longer ones tend to go to the plants with longer stems and stuff. So there are these like sometimes really, really specific specializations and preferences of bees for certain flowers.
Perfect. Great question from Ms. Ackerson's class. I wanted to mention too, West Des Moines in Iowa, so another state. I think we have 5 states, 2 provinces, and some international students too, so it's really exciting. Thanks so much to everyone for joining in. I'm going to go to Akash now. Welcome in, man. If you have a question for us, just demute your mic. And,
Hi.
go for it. Hey.
Okay, my question is, managed beehives are increasing worldwide, but they are unable to compensate for the loss of wild pollinators in many locations. Why?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, you're right. So managed bee populations, those honeybee hives, tend to be increasing. More and more people are getting them. But honeybees just can't do the same thing that wild bees can. Honeybees are like really specific sometimes in the plants that they pollinate, or in the plants that they visit at least. Whereas wild bees are like really particular to the landscapes that they're from. So we think about bumblebees, for example. That's the bees that I work with the most. Bumblebees are so big, and they're kind of fuzzy, right? And so they can keep heat really well. And so when it's the springtime and when it's the fall, the earliest and the latest bees that are going to be outside pollinating flowers are going to be those bumblebees. So when all the other bees are still hibernating for the winter, the bumblebees are going to be the ones that are out pollinating the early spring flowers or pollinating the last flowers of the year. And so honeybees just can't do that. They can't come out that early because they're not big enough. They can't keep the heat necessary to sustain that type of activity. So that's just one way in which the wild bees do just a lot more than just the honeybees. And if you think about it, there's only really, at least in North America, there's one species of managed honeybee that we use. But there are hundreds of different types of wild bees, from bumblebees to really small sweat bees to minor bees and carpenter bees. So there's a lot more diversity and variety of wild bees that can just do a lot more for natural ecosystems.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Akash. I'm going to take a question from a group or a student in North Carolina, and welcome back. Asheville, North Carolina, they seem to be in every single session we have, so welcome in. So nice to have so many classes there taking part. And then amidst a few other YouTube questions, we will take one more from every single live class, so stay tuned, keep those questions ready. But let's bring it up about mosquitoes. Are mosquitoes important for pollinating, Peter? Or can we just smack them when they're on us? What's the deal?
I will definitely give you a free pass on swatting any mosquito on you. I know I do for sure. But mosquitoes are super important. They do pollinate a little bit, but they're just really important for the ecosystem otherwise as well. Everything from like fish to bats to birds to even like amphibians and reptiles. A lot of the ecosystem depends on small insects like mosquitoes. And so they form like a really important base layer of like, they're just food for a lot of different things. And so they might be really annoying when we're outside, but all the things that we love to look at when we're outside depend on mosquitoes.
Yeah, great question. Great message, Peter. All right, one more question, then I'll go back to Ms. Holden's class. This is from London, Mr. Patrick's class, and I love this question. I know you've covered it in some of your other broadcasts, but are there particular types of flowers people can plant to increase pollinators in their backyards or neighborhoods? Anything we can share on how we can get more of those amazing pollinators near us?
Yeah, that's a great question. Awesome one. And yes, there are. The best thing you can do if you want to attract wild pollinators and wild bees, the best thing you can do is plant wild flowers. So the best thing is to figure out, depending on what region you're from, what are the wild plants? What are the native plants that are there? And you can visit, a garden center would probably tell you this, a conservation authority or center would tell you this. You could Google it online and figure it out. But those are the best plants to prioritize in your garden. And this way you'll attract not only, wild bees and butterflies, but also maybe things like hummingbirds, some other birds. So if you make your garden as natural as possible, you'll create, an oasis of habitat in the middle of even a whole city. So it's, yeah.
Awesome. I'm really glad we covered natural flowers as opposed to a specific kind, because we have students joining from all over the world, and what the natural ecosystem is near you will be different from what other classes is wherever they are across Canada or the States. So there's lots of environmental groups. Again, Peter mentioned garden centers, great opportunities to find out what lives near you that you can plant to really attract those amazing things like the sweat bee that you showed us and the metallic green. Like, there's just the coolest things out there if you stop to look. Ms. Holden, I'll bring you back into the broadcast again from Spruce Grove. You got another question for us? Come on up.
I do. Lily and Emmett are wondering about bees and how many different kinds of bees there are in Canada, and how many bees can you put into one hive?
Oh, awesome questions. Thanks, Lily Allen. So I think, so how many bees are there in Canada? Oh man, a lot. There are a lot of different bees. I don't remember the number, but it's in the hundreds. There are, yeah, hundreds of different bees in Canada, and it, all from like the natural honeybee or the managed honeybees that we might see most often, but all the way from things like bumblebees that we notice that are really big. These little sweat bees, a ton of different bees. There are so many, and if you Google like wild bees in Canada, you'll be like amazed by the diversity of them. And the other part of the question was, how many can you fit in a hive? That's another great question, because it varies depending on what species it is. So managed honeybees in those big beehives, they can be up to tens of thousands of individual bees inside a single hive there. But a lot of other bees are solitary. A lot of those metallic green sweat bees that I showed, they live pretty much always alone by themselves. And they build a nest on their own, they collect pollen on their own. They do everything just by themselves. Bumblebees have even smaller or slightly bigger colonies of a couple dozen or maybe tens of individuals. So it's a huge range of lifestyles and behaviors for these bees.
Yeah,
great question.
Nice question, guys. Ms. Burj, I will come to you in a second. We've got a student standing up in Ms. Gully's class, so I'll make sure that they get a chance to come in. And a huge note, too, Ms. Gully's students, congrats on wearing masks, on distancing. You guys rock. Way to go. Nice to get you guys back in the classroom safely. So kudos to you guys. And, yeah, we'd love to hear your question.
Do pollinates hibernate? Does pollinators hibernate?
Yeah, do pollinators hibernate?
Oh, yeah, that's another really great question. And well, they do, depending on which pollinators they are. If you think of things like, so another really important group of pollinators are bats. And so they do hibernate for the winter. But if we're just looking at kind of bees and bees, most bees do actually hibernate. So bumblebees, for example, every year bumblebees will start a whole new colony. So at the end of the summer, all of the bees die in the colony, except for the new queens. And those new queens, they find like an old mouse hole, or they'll burrow a nest somewhere, or find some old wood and burrow into it. And then they'll make this little nest, this little kind of cave, and then they'll just hibernate there for the whole winter. And then in the spring, those new queens come out and they start a whole new hive. And then the cycle starts again at the end of the year. So yeah, a lot of these bees will hibernate throughout the winter and then come out in the spring.
Hibernation and metamorphosis, you talked about butterflies earlier, are two of those things that sort of we all understand, we learn when we're really young, but are the more and more magical the more you think about them. I mean, wow, I wish we could pull that off, or I don't know. It's very cool stuff. Ms. Burj, I'll come to you in 1 second. I know I keep delaying you, and I'm sorry about that. I'm going to take one more question from YouTube, come to you to wrap us off, and then we'll talk a little bit about Backyard Bio before we wrap. But I love this question, and it leads so nicely into something that we're starting for this year for the first time with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants High School. So we really want to highlight careers, how people can get into cool careers like yours, Peter. And so Miss Dancy Jones, she wants to know about a specific research question that you're covering right now and sort of advice that you'd share with students that are in high school that maybe want to end up being like you when they grow up. So we've got, I'll take your answer in a minute, and I want to note for everyone joining in, we're going to be doing special high school sessions throughout every single month going forward, and every single week releasing a cool featurette, 10, 15 minutes with an amazing scientist. Today's is a polar bear biologist, so you can check that out on our YouTube channel as well. But I'll turn it over to Peter to highlight some of his own story.
Yeah, awesome question. And yeah, so specifically what I'm studying right now is I'm looking at the interactions of climate change and land use change and how these impact pollinators across North America and Europe. So I use these big data sets, things that are collected from community scientists like you guys going out in Backyard Bio, and other researchers, collecting information over the last 120 years. And I use all this information to figure out where bees were in the past, where they are now, and how things like climate and different changes in how we're using the land has influenced the abundance or the survival of these bumblebees. And then I try to highlight areas where things are going really well for bees, and then figure out where things are going really poorly. And then I look at why are things going so poorly in those regions? What can we do to ameliorate the situation or to mitigate the impact of climate change and land use change? So that's the specific question that I look at. And I do some smaller things because I am always distracted and always easily sidetracked by really cool questions. When I was first, what advice would I have for high school students? It would really be to like, I guess this is cheesy, but don't limit yourself. When I was in high school, I only really knew, I was good in science. I really loved science, but I only thought you could be like a medical doctor. I thought if you were good at science, you were either a medical doctor or an engineer. And so I was like, almost went into medicine. And when I started in undergrad in university, that's what I was doing until I took an ecology course. And then it just like blew my mind, like all of the passion, all of my love for nature just like came back, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So if you're in high school right now, if you really love nature, if you really love wildlife or anything, if you really like chemistry or physics, don't feel like you have to do something else. Follow that dream and passion. Google is a super great tool for looking at, career options or to look up people that do cool things and figure out what their path was. So yeah, just if you're really passionate about something, try your best to follow that. You're going to do better in it and you're going to love yourself more.
Fantastic. And while you're waiting, if you're not in high school, we've got some grade 3s today and whatnot. Peter, you highlighted some really cool resources, National Geographic, BBC series, things like Planet Earth, Blue Planet. Those are the things that inspired me when I was a kid to get into this field. So check those things out. There's always great resources out there, whether that's Netflix or DVDs. You can get books, magazines, so many amazing resources. And check out Peter's website. You know what? I'll bring that up right now. You can check out Peter's website. Learn more about Peter. Peter's awesome. In case you guys haven't noticed already, he's got the coolest shirts of any we've ever had on any of our broadcasts. So just check out all the past ones for more of that too. I'm going to go to Ms. Burj. One last question to wrap us up before we do a little last feature bit. So Ms. Burj, just demute your mic and you're good to go.
Hello. I have a kiddo. Shagun is wondering, do the queen bees ever pollinate, or are they responsible for other things?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, Shagun. And they do usually pollinate, but it depends on what species it is. So if you're thinking about a managed honeybee hive where the queen just like sits in the middle of the hive the whole time, the queen doesn't do anything. They focus on having babies and on keeping the hive kind of in order inside the hive, but it's other bees that are going out to pollinate. But if you think about wild bees, pretty much every wild bee, from bumblebees to sweat bees, the queen or the female that's producing eggs is also at one point going to have to go and pollinate as well. They're going to have to forage for resources at the start of the year before they're starting the colony, and they're going to have to go and pollinate flowers as they do that.
Fantastic. All right. Before we wrap up, and I sort of take a last message from you and Peter on how we can get kids involved in nature, you spent so much of your presentation very graciously highlighting BackyardBio. So I want to bring this up for anyone who's joined in. If you haven't joined in, it's our program all month long, encouraging you guys to get out into nature, share the pictures or drawings of wildlife that you happen to see wherever you are in the world. You can do that on Twitter with #BackyardBio. Peter's been doing a ton of that. You can check us out on iNaturalist, and we're going to release a video later today on how you can submit photos to iNaturalist if you're new to it. So Peter and I have a bit of a friendly competition or unfriendly competition depending on the day going on. I think I'm winning right now. I think Peter's going to cream me by the end, but just showcasing some of the cool species that live near us in Toronto and Ottawa. So check all those out. You can register your class as well, partner with classes from around the world. I think some of our classes in today are already in, but we're going to be sending more resources for how you guys can get involved, and we'd love to have you take part. I know Peter is probably as excited as I am to see what you guys can share with us. So do check that out. And Peter, thanks again for highlighting that today. Before we wrap, is there any last message you'd like to share about pollinators for kids to get out and explore, and anything to wrap us up?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just like take some time, go outside. Like it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time. If you have half an hour, if you have an hour after dinner, or you have some time after school, just take a little walk outside. Head to a park near you. Head to like a few bushes on the side of a fence. Like you'll be amazed what you can see if you just like take a few minutes, look at a bush. You'll start to see 1 or 2 bees. You might see an ant crawling around, and then you start to see some aphids. You'll be amazed if you take a couple minutes. things start to pop out and you wonder how you could have lived your life without seeing them before.
Awesome. We are calling it the 10-minute nature challenge. So like, we know that it's a crazy September. A lot of classes are a lot different than they would normally be. So literally spend 10 minutes. Encourage your kids to spend 10 minutes. Look up, listen for birds, look for insects at your feet. And I bet you can find 10 species. So if every kid that's involved in the project that is registered did that, we'd have over 25,000 observations of wildlife in this month alone. So 10-minute nature challenge, check that out. We got a YouTube video for it as well. And yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much, Peter.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. This is always, the highlight of my week, month, year, baby.
Decade, life. Well, we're happy to help. And I want to give the teachers that are joining us the chance to say a big thank you as well. So Miss Holden, Miss Burj, Miss Gully and her class, Akash, if you guys want to join us and say a huge thank you to Peter. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. We really appreciate y'all being here. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.